In this video, we're going to go over the assembly of the Sherline Model 2000 6-axis mill. This is a CNC ready version. Let's go ahead and get this out of the crate and we'll start getting it put together. So I want to make a quick mention of cleaning some of the protectorant that comes from the factory off of the mill. Same information that we had with the lathe. They recommend using either paint thinner, which this is 100% mineral spirits, or using kerosene. I typically like to have a small bucket to pour some of it out into and dip the rags into. I recommend shop towels over paper towels if you like these disposable kind, or of course the normal cloth rags that you can get. One thing that I did not mention previously is the use of WD-40. Sherline recommends against using WD-40 as a lubricant and cleaner, and using it only for rust protection if you're going to store the mill for a longer period of time. So even though other manufacturers may actually recommend cleaning and degreasing their mills and their lathes and their machines with WD-40, since Sherline recommends very specifically against it, we're going to go ahead and follow Sherline's instructions and set the WD-40 aside. I didn't really go into detail on this in the video on the on the lathe, but this assembly and instruction guide is available as a PDF on Sherline's website, and included with it are several other little items and pieces of paper. A couple of reference cards for converting decimals to fractions, which are kind of nice. Also tap sizes and what your clearance holes would be for those tap sizes. Or sorry, not clearance holes, but drill holes. There is a small instruction card here concerning the removing of the rust prevention, and again it does say do not use WD-40, so we're going to follow that. They've got another little piece of paper on their gib removal tool. And then a page on installing the stepper motors, which is where we're actually going to start rather than starting in the instructions in the manual. This is because the only way to attach the hand wheels is with a stepper motor or an extension shaft in place. So we want to get that taken care of so that we can assemble the rest of the machine more easily. And then an exploded parts view on the back. Last little thing that's included is just a accessories catalog. But there's some good information in a lot of these little booklets. This is the Model 2000 CNC, so it includes the adapters for the CNC motors on all three axes. This makes it a little bit harder to attach hand wheels without the CNC motors. CNC motors are not included in the CNC Ready kit, but they do make a kit which will include the motors, the control unit itself, some of the cables, electronics, if you want to purchase that, or you can source them from other manufacturers. I'm going to go ahead and open up 3 of these motors to get going on these 3 axes. As I showed with the mills as well, this is one of the Sherline CNC stepper motors. The shaft on this, if you want to put a hand wheel directly on here without the double output shaft, needs to be roughly 1 3/4 inches long. It can probably be made a little bit shorter than that. And this is a 1/4 inch rod. It does have some flats milled in it, so those may be some good ideas to try to file in or use a Dremel since you don't have your mill set up yet to make those nice machined flats. Just gives a place for the set screw to purchase onto and hold on to. One other thing to note is that the electrical connectors on these, you don't want to face them up because they'll just collect dirt and coolant. You probably want to face them down, or in the case of the top axis, to the back, to keep it all cleaner. So we're going to get started on this front axis. One of the key things to do is that there is a set screw on this inner shaft, and we want to make sure that it is aligned with a small hole that's in the side of the mount here, so that we can get to the set screw. So we're going to leave that in there just so that the shaft doesn't rotate. Then we will need 3 of the shorter screws that come with the CNC ready kit. And we're going to turn the shaft so that the flat surface is to the side. And simply slide it on. And you will insert again just 3 screws. The last screw is used as the last screw hole is used as a strain relief for the cable. Nope, using the wrong hex key. Hole on the lower right here is what I'm going to go ahead and leave open to use as a strain relief. Now the idea with the strain relief is this is the connector that goes to the CNC motor. It's a fairly small little connector. You don't want to put a lot of tension on that. So once you connect that to the bottom of the motor, that last hole, you'll secure the cable to keep tension off the cable as this moves around with one of the included zip ties or wire ties. Okay, so once you have these 3 screws tightened down, go ahead and make sure that the flat on the shaft is pointed towards this set screw. And tighten the set screw onto the shaft. Last step is 0 adjust hand wheels. One thing on these is you do have to line up. There's a hole in them, and you need to line that up with where the set screw goes, like so. We want to slide that all the way on. Again, paying attention to where that flat on the shaft is at, and snug that up. And so now we'll be able to move this axis. I'm going to do the same over here on the y-axis. I'm probably not going to do the z-axis until it is installed, but we'll figure that out later. So our next step is going to be installing the column onto the back of the mill here. And also make sure that you align this hole up with the lead screw cover here. Now from underneath, you'll use 2 1/4-20 screws to bolt the column to the base of the mill. And these are the largest screws that come in the set and in the kit. Okay, next step to prepare, we remove the flange nut from the top of the column. And there will be a extension shaft that needs to be screwed on in its place. And give that a tighten. On mine this is a 3/8 inch wrench, or you can use adjustable wrench. Then I've taken the rest of the packing off of the swing arm and opened it up to about a 90-degree angle. We're just going to set it over the top, making sure that it does engage the block to keep its alignment. Then there's this heavy metal washer that goes on. And lastly, the nut goes back in place. They don't recommend that you put any lubricant on any of these surfaces so that it will stay held in place more tightly, as it should. So I've just adjusted the mill to where you can get a little bit better view. There's an aluminum block that has 2 unthreaded holes and 1 threaded hole, and we're going to place that on top of the swing arm. There are 2 threaded holes in the swing arm, which we'll be placing some 5/8 inch long screws into. This allows a fine adjustment of the angle on the Z-axis. After both of those are in and tightened down, there's a third screw that goes in place of the threaded middle hole. It's a 1-inch long screw, and it's what engages to provide the fine adjustment on a flat spot of the ball of the head here. Next up, we're going to install the head on the mill. So this is where the spindle for the mill resides. There's a slot in the back here that matches up with the machine bar that's already in the head. So on the side of the mill, there's a small set screw. You want to make sure that that is backed out enough to clear on the inside. And we're going to snug that up, making sure that the key fits well, the alignment key, and then tighten that on there. While we're here, we're going to go ahead and remove these 2 screws for the motor mount. The motor mount is identical to what's used on the lathe. It's an L-shaped piece. It has 2 adjusting slots and then 2 fixed holes. This is going to attach to the side of the head like so. So those are tightened up on there. I'm going to actually set this aside and we'll start working on the motor and the speed control. So we have our motor here. One of the first things we have to do is remove the shaft. Remove the pulley from the shaft. Set that aside for later. Now, the motor is going to sit up here. So we need to again make sure that we get the right side of the belt guard and pulley cover to install onto the motor. And we want the power cord to be running out of the back. So when we turn this, we'll want to make sure and use those 2 holes. There are other holes on here, but we want to use those 2. The hardware for the motor kit comes in its own little package, and these are the first pieces we need. It has a threaded stud and a threaded hole and shoulders on both sides. When you put these in, make sure that the shoulders, that the rounded portion goes into the rounded hole in the plastic and that you're not pinching the plastic. And just finger tight. Should be fine there. Now we're going to put the pulley back onto the shaft. Make sure to align the set screw with the flat on the shaft. And tighten it down. At this point we want to grab our belt next and just loop it over the pulley. Make sure that it's running in a way that it's over the pulley in one of the studs. Then we can put our other half of the guard on. So next we need to take and secure these 2 halves of plastic together with these longer silver screws. They're a Phillips head, and a couple of nuts that fit in recesses. So there are just small hex recesses molded into the back, which means you don't need a wrench to help tighten these on. There's no Phillips screwdriver included with the kit. You don't need these to be super tight, so just a number 2 Phillips bit. They don't even have the handle attached to mine here. Now we're ready to put the motor onto the motor mount. Now the instructions state to have the speed control mounted already, but as I did on the lathe, I'm going to leave the speed control off for now so that we can get a better picture of adjusting the pulleys. So once that's lined up on there, don't let it fall. You'll use some screws with a double washer, 2 washers on them. Now you don't want these to be really tight. You just want them to be tight enough to hold the motor somewhat flat and level. And start with it pressed as close to the head as you can. Now, as on the lathe, we want to get the belt on the larger pulley on the motor spindle and the smaller pulley on the mill head. You want to check to make sure that this is as close to inline as possible, which I got lucky. I don't need to adjust either of the pulleys as I did on the lathe, but you can definitely take a look at the lathe video for details on how to adjust those. There's just set screws that loosen these and you can move them up and down the shafts. You can make sure that if you do lower this pulley that you don't end up contacting the plastic. So next we need to tension the belt. Right now it is quite loose and would not work that well. So we're just going to put some tension between the spindle and the motor housing, just using some hand pressure. You don't need this to be super tight. By leaving it not over tightened, you'll increase the wear and the life of the belt. If you do start to run into a problem where the belt is slipping on this spindle, then just tighten it up a little bit more. So the last item to install is our speed control. On the speed control, there's a little bar on the back and 2 ears on the pulley covers with holes in them. So we just slip one through the hole. Okay, so I'm actually running into a problem where this space here is too narrow for the ear to go through and to fit into. So I'm going to carve, it looks like there's some extra plastic left on this piece from the molding process. I'm just going to take a sharp knife. So I pared just a little bit off of there, not very much at all. There was just some flashing left. And now it slips in quite well. Put the other hole in, and there's our housing mounted and ready to go. Last step here is to install the catch hold down, or the little lock for the speed control. There's a bevel on it to make clearance for this pulley. All you have to do is slide this in and push it forward. Then we close the housing and use what should be our last screw and washer. To hold it closed. One last item, if you've been keeping track of the pieces and parts that you have, you should have a set of 3 of these small little caps. So they're meant to plug these holes to where you can access the set screw on the motor shaft just to keep dirt and grit out of them. So probably not a bad idea to install those, which I neglected to do on the lathe in the previous video. As with the lathe, you really do want to mount your mill onto a shelf board. So just a piece of laminate covered or melamine covered board that you can get at the home centers. On this unit it should be 12 inches wide by roughly 24 inches deep. You'll want to put some rubber feet on there. I like the screw-on kind versus the stick-on kind, just for a little more permanency. And then you'll need a total of 4 number 10 by 32 inch screws that are 1 inch long. Need some washers to go on those, and then I chose to pick up some nylon lock nuts instead of the standard nut, just so that there's less chance of it coming loose. After that, you're ready to start aligning your mill. You can do some test cuts before alignment, but on a mill there are quite a few alignment steps that need to be done before it will be accurate, just because there are so many moving and tilting axes that can throw some of the measurements off.